Welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast, your weekly look inside the world of fly fishing presented by Pete Tigers. If you're enjoying listening, please consider subscribing.
What do you do with your old waders after you've tried hard to stop those leaks? Today I'm talking with Charlie Brownlow to learn about how he upcycles old waders and makes them into fishing bags, reel cases and much more. He's also a passionate fly angler who grew up with a fly rod in his hand.
Charlie, it's great to have you along on the Fly Culture Podcast. Are you well, my friend?
I am indeed. Yeah, no, very well. Thank you. How are you?
Very well indeed, thank you. Yep, I went to a great fishing show locally yesterday and it was really nice to catch up with people that you hadn't seen in a while. And obviously with the trout season, the salmon season's just got underway now, but with the trout season getting going, it was really nice. It was a sort of a curtain raiser for the season, so it was a really nice way to start things. And, you know, I was thinking actually, I know we stay in touch and we talk from time to time, and, you know, you've been down to this neck of the woods and I was super chuffed that you came and fished my home river on the tour. That was some fun, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. No, it was very kind of you to have me. And if you remember, I had a knock as well in the pool as I was fishing it down. You actually called it as well. He said, "Just concentrate a little bit more there," but unfortunately it didn't stay on. But it was nonetheless got the blood going.
Absolutely, that was great fun. And I also remember that I dunked my phone. I waded far too deep and dunked my phone, and that was knackered as well. So it was memorable for many reasons, some of them not so good. But those moments are fantastic. And, you know, it was lovely bumping into you the day before. And you know, I'd been lucky enough to catch a fish. And so it was kind of, I was a little bit warmed up from where the fish might be and stuff like that. So it was great from there. But how are you doing it? Have you been out fishing? Is your season underway? What are you up to?
Yeah, the season is underway. I'm afraid I'm going to admit to being slightly wet about the whole thing, and that the weather conditions up here have been appalling. And I've all my kit is ready to go, but I haven't actually been out yet. It's that's coming soon. I think Harry, my eldest son, was at home at the weekend, and he was very much, "Come on, Dad, let's go." Unfortunately, Claire, my wife, had other ideas and other plans. But no, not yet, but soon. How about you?
Yeah, no, we've been out the once for salmon so far. And I was talking to my friend Perry the other day, actually, and I was saying I'm becoming a bit more fair weather about it and choosing the moments a little bit more. And I'm sort of, you know, it's a little bit drier. There's lots of things I've got to do. But I'm sort of flirting with the idea of perhaps, and obviously with my friend Steve catching a fish on one of our local rivers, that sort of gets you interested again. So I'm sort of flirting with the idea of perhaps zipping down at some stage. We've got the back end of grayling. Again, grayling I've not really done any real justice to over the winter. Due more to weather conditions than anything else. So my hope is that I may be able to creep out and perhaps find one of those at one stage. But for our listeners, you know, you said that the season's underway. Can you let us know where you're based and what your home water is and where you tend to do most of your fishing?
Absolutely. I mean, I sort of slightly feel that my life has been a river runs through it of some description because, growing up, I lived in Norfolk, in a mill house, so the River Glaven literally runs underneath the house. But now I'm living up in the Scottish borders, in between Jedburgh and Hawick, which is on the River Teviot, which, to my mind, is probably one of the most accessible and underrated rivers in the borders. It's got a fantastic sea trout run, which I don't think many people realise. From June, July, August into September, fantastic fish. It's got a good salmon run as well, but they're a little bit harder to come by. But that, I fear, is the story sort of across the UK. Mainly, interestingly, as a river, it's mainly run by angling associations. So you've got Kelso at the bottom, where the Teviot meets the Tweed at the famous Junction Pool. Kelso Angling have some fishing down there. Then you've got Sunlaws, which is a private beat, moving into Jed Angling Association, which has quite a fair whack of fishing and some incredible fishing. Again, really good for sea trout. I used to live further down towards Kelso and spent a lot of time chasing sea trout in the summer months, which was brilliant. And actually got to the point where I could almost guarantee moving fish to the fly. Wouldn't necessarily catch them every time, but I knew where they were, which was amazing to get to know a beat that well. We then moved further up towards Hoyk, and I'm part of Hoyk Angling Association. I actually haven't bought my ticket this year yet. But again, that's £90. It might be a little bit more than that now, actually, per season. The boys, it's a tenner for them to fish all season on the river, which is unbelievable. And again, some really great fishing, a lot of it. Very rarely see people down there, but when you do, it's a really nice club. Everyone's helpful, ask the questions and they will give you straight answers, and mostly honest answers, I guess. But no, really, it's a really fun river to fish. And actually, sadly, well, not sadly, but we're moving in a month or two's time. It just needs to all be finalised, but we're going to be on the Till, right beside the Till, which is another cracking sea trout river, tributary of the Tweed.
And that's extraordinary to me. A couple of things that you mentioned there that, you're talking about probably what I imagine is a major tributary of the Tweed. And like you say, the salmon would be something that you would think about. And I kind of like that you're passionate about the sea trout side of it as well, which is really interesting to me. And also the cost, because being so close, as you say, the famous junction pool, people often will feel that it's a river that you may not get the opportunity to go fish, but for £90 a year, or if it's 100 or whatever it is, still seems relatively good value. Why was it the sea trout or it seems in what you said, are of more interest to you? Did you just enjoy fishing for those and that opportunity to fish for them? What was it that seems in what you said to tick the box slightly more than salmon?
Do you know what I think it is? I grew up fishing the Norfolk rivers, as I said, but actually we'd spend 2-3 weeks up north and on the west coast fishing the sort of small spatey rivers, and actually a bit of time in the Hebrides as well. So I like fishing with lighter tackle, smaller rods. I'm not a big river fisherman. I mean, yes, I'll do it. I'm not terribly keen on chucking a massive line out. But yes, I'll do it. So don't not invite me, anyone. So I like the smaller river, and I think the sea trout on the Teviot, sea trout even up north, you can use the sort of 9, 10, 11 foot rods, no sweat. And in actual fact, on the Teviot, I'll use light kit for the salmon as well. But interestingly, I tend to have a Peter Ross and maybe a muddler or a goat's toe on full time. So it's quite an interesting one because I haven't actually caught a salmon in a couple of seasons. I've lost a couple and my sons have caught them. But I've caught a lot of sea trout, and I think that's because in my mind's eye, I just head down to the river, and I automatically, the alley shrimp stays in the fly wallet, but out comes it's almost become habit, I think.
And is that daytime sea trout, or you tending to go sort of later in the day or late afternoon, early evening, and fishing through a little bit later? Is there a pattern? Is it? What path does that take? Yeah,
so with the sea trout, I really like in sort of June, July, August. I like between 8:30 and 11:30 for in the evening for catching sea trout. I think it's a magical time of the day. A lot of the wildlife comes out. So, I could almost actually at the last house, there was a pool, and at 10 o'clock every night, a family of otters would swim up, and they'd almost swim up to me and then sort of scoot off when they saw me. And it was almost to the minute that they'd arrive, come whistling up the river. It was amazing.
Wow, that sounds pretty cool. And how do you find, because I know we almost are predisposed, I think, in some examples to not like otters being around, but I found that I've fished pools for trout, certainly, and an otter's gone through the pool, and the fish have just kept on rising. Have you found similar experiences or not?
Yeah, I really don't mind otters at all. In fact, I think they're great on the riverbank. It's like the sort of the roe deer or the red stag coming down off the hill. It's all part and parcel of river life. I think, interestingly, and this is sort of, there's no science to bear out what I'm about to say, but I think the decrease in elver and eel populations, which would have been the staple diet of the otters historically, and certainly taken the pressure off trout, sea trout, and salmon in our rivers, they have declined so much that I think the otters now have less option to feed on in the rivers, and they're probably taking more game fish than they were. But even so, like you say, I would imagine that 10 minutes after an otter's been through, everything's fairly back to normal. The same applies to canoeists. I don't mind canoeists and rafters coming down, come out, step out of the river for a bit. It pretty quickly goes back to how it was. I love seeing them.
Nice. And you mentioned your sons catching a couple of salmon last year, and I know from your social media and everything else, you're out fishing with them a fair bit, and they're super keen. They really enjoy it. And do you think it's something that's going to stay with them, fishing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Alfie, the youngest, actually caught, and he's not a sort of manic keen fisherman. He caught his at 5, literally who's on a spinner, but he chucked it out on the river line. I was standing there. He got it hooked on the far bank, so I took the rod and just gave it a little pull off. The Toby fell off, and he started reeling it back. And I turned around and was talking to my godmother, who was coming down the bank, and her face was just like, "Oh my God, he's got one!" I turned around, and sure enough, there was this bar of silver on my 5-year-old, sort of clinging on for dear life. But yeah, he loves the social side of fishing. So he loves a good fishing hut, and he loves the company. We'll do 5-10 minutes of fishing, then come back in and sort of run around the place. Harry, the eldest, is absolutely mad keen on fishing. He caught an absolutely stunning 16-pound salmon on the Hoyk Angling Association water on the Teviot. I've caught 3 or 4 salmon at 15. My father has caught one at 15. My father-in-law, I think, is around there as well. He certainly hasn't broken the 15. My mum's at 14. My sister was, I think her biggest is about 8. So he's actually, at the moment, in Scotland, leading the way with Atlantic salmon size. So he's chuffed a bit. But he also won the Beamerside Junior Trophy, which was brilliant for him. But I mean, certainly with it going forward, I think the absolute key, and it's the same with sort of all field sports, I guess, and I guess with all sports, if his friends don't fish, well, by the time he's 15, 16, and other things have sort of piqued his interest, if not before, I think like a lot of people I know, it sort of gets pushed to the side, and it maybe come back to it either when he has children or when he's established and got a job when he's sort of 28, 29, 30, come back to it. I think the absolute key to keeping him fishing through that time is his friends fishing. So we try where we can. We take a beat here and there on the Tweed or on the Teviot, is to take his friends and for him to invite his friends to come down and fish. A lot of them will have fished with their parents before, but it's so important that they create that camaraderie and that sort of feeling of fun that can be had on a riverbank. I mean, I remember sort of as a teenager and in my early 20s having an absolute riot up north. You take a lodge for a week with 12 mates. You fish every day. You maybe do a little bit of stalking or shooting, but the main sort of concentration is on the fishing. And there is nothing better than being on the riverbank with mates and just, when the conditions are bad, having fun and, maybe even going in for a swim, whatever. But when the conditions are good, you will get involved and you make hay while the sun shines. It is the best. And I would really hope that both of them actually get to experience that.
That's a really good mindset to have. And I like where you're coming from, introducing, if they haven't done it already, his friends to it as well. And I know also the conservation side is really important. And you've got your sons involved with that. And I think you created something called River Rats, wasn't it? Where you encouraged youngsters to collect litter from the river, which I think is a lovely initiative and at least gets them down to the river and getting them to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it alongside the river. That was a fantastic idea, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was funnily enough, that's sort of slightly taken a back seat recently. And I think if I look back at my time in lockdown, that might be the river rat element of it, might be the bit that I think I really should have done more with that. The idea was that we created these little bags out of recycled waders that the children could take down. And once they've done their fishing or before they've done their fishing, probably after they've fished, is they just go and fill the bag up with any rubbish they can find, take it home and put it in the bin. And it is, this time of year, I always think, I'm up and down the river the whole time. You look in it does look slightly like a sort of one long Tibetan prayer mountain because there is literally rubbish hanging off all the trees. Now that goes, and in 2 months' time, you won't be able to see it anymore. It'll just be hidden. But at this time of year, you really appreciate the rubbish that is floating down our rivers. And it's hardly surprising that then you look at you hear in the news all about sort of sea and the rubbish in the sea. Well, I suspect most of it floats down from our, dare I say it, our industry up the rivers and private litter as well, just floating down the river, out to sea it goes, and then it becomes a coastal problem rather than a river problem.
Yeah, it's a good point. And like you say, engaging youngsters as well has been a fantastic idea. And I hope people listening may consider that with their youngsters as well as part of that. Because I know with children and fishing, like you, I think, have alluded to, is keeping them interested in it, but not. I think it's easy to force your passion onto your children. And although it sounds as though you come from a rich vein of fishing within both sides of your family, I know I was very, very careful with my daughter not to push too hard, and she sort of drifts in and out of it from time to time. But engaging them away from just the casting process and everything else by collecting litter and everything else that goes with that, I think is a really great initiative that I can only applaud. So thank you for such a great idea. And before we come on to another great idea about the repurposing of old waders, I wanted to look down, as you said, catching salmon at an early age. And you talked about growing up in a mill house on a Norfolk Chalkstream. And that, to me, is a lovely starting point as well, because the Norfolk Chalkstreams I know a little about. I know stories of fish that have been caught in them and everything else, because I guess we get a lot of chalk streams run all the way up the east side or parts of the east side of the country, don't we? All the way up to Yorkshire. I know I've been as far as Driffield Beck, but Norfolk's eluded me, and I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about the Glaven there, and perhaps anything else about the Norfolk Chalkstreams that you might know. Must have been an amazing place to grow up and start your fly fishing career.
Do you know what? It really was. And actually, I hate to say it, I don't think I really understood or appreciated at the time what I had on my doorstep. It really interestingly as well, I was listening, I listened to Peter McLeod's podcast with you. I think it must have been last year. I think it was in lockdown I listened to it. And out of the blue, because he's a Norfolk boy as well, he grew up in Hunstanton, I think, he said. But he then goes on to say, I started coarse fishing at some lakes at Edgefield. Now, Edgefield is actually, the lakes there will be part of the River Glaven. They will run into the Glaven. My dad also had some lakes I think I know where he was, on the opposite sides of the road. And again, I started very young age with a worm fishing for carp in some lakes there. And it's really weird that two of your contributors have been started within such a small area. But no, the River Glaven and actually the River Stiffkey and the Wissey are fascinating rivers and have had an awful lot. I think in the last 10 years, there's been, and maybe even a bit longer, so much work done by so many different people to preserve, protect, understand, in actual fact, put back in some places the rivers to their natural state. I mean, the Glaven has a run of sea trout, and where we are, the Norfolk Rivers Trust, if you can imagine, it was an old mill with a massive great slab of water in front of it, the mill pond. I mean, a proper sort of, just expanse of water that had predominantly silted up. There was a run as you're looking up the river, to the right-hand side. So the fish could run it, but otherwise it was 100 metres, 150 metres of pretty useless water. And between Dad, the Norfolk Rivers Trust and Wild Trout Trust, I think, were involved. They have turned that small section back into a really nice meandering river with redds for the fish to spawn. There's under the house, there's a proper fish ladder now put in with an elver run up the side because we get a really good run of elvers. And in fact, Dad recently posted on Twitter that he caught in his mophead traps the first elvers, which is quite early. I think that was last week. So just on Dad's bit alone, there's been so much work and study done that replicated, because it's the whole river taking part, and the Stiffkey's the same, the Wissey to an extent. I think that has been earmarked. That's a slightly different kettle of fish. That these rivers, I think, are looking really good for the future. And a part of the reason for getting the mill pond back into a nice meandering river with the reds was for the sea trout. And they have been monitoring it. Sea trout have been running it. Actually, to slightly go off on a tangent, I remember as a boy, the old fish ladder was steps, as you would imagine. Going up under the house, and the fish could run up. And the dining room is set down, so there's two windows either side of the stairs that look down onto the river as it runs past. But Dad let the water out of the mill pond, which he used to do for various reasons, and blow me down. In one of the sections was a 5-pound sea trout stuck in the thing. So salmon net was got. Black bin was filled up with water, fish put in the black bin, took it up to the top of the ford, and it was released healthy as anything back in above the mill pond. But it just shows that these rivers have an abundance of wildlife. There's so much going on again, otters. Dad very regularly sees the otters. We have kingfishers. And interestingly, actually, the other day, he was a couple of summers ago, found a kingfisher's nest dug out, and a badger had gone down and dug them out. And I've seen the same, I think, here with sand martin nests, which I didn't realise happened. But no, the Norfolk Chalkstreams, again, the Wissey, my father-in-law has a stretch of the Wissey, which is sort of further round. That's an amazing river because that obviously flows out of the Thetford trading area, which is an extraordinary place. I mean, it's sort of untouched since 1940. And the river there, again, is in amazing health. And his stretch is stunning. I mean, it's, you go down there, they do a lot of work as a sort of syndicate to cut the reed and make sure that there's space to fish, but they very much keep the banks wild, partly as camouflage, but also, I think it helps. So no, they're great little rivers, and we will have to get you up when we're there in the summer, and you should come and have a fish.
I would love to. It'd be a dream to be able to do that. And I'm visualizing it in my mind now while we're talking. And, if we used, how would you describe them size wise? I guess the clarity is similar to what we might see in the Hampshire, Wiltshire Chalkstreams. Would I be right in that sense? Are they deep? How would you describe them to myself and to the listeners to get a sense of what they're like?
Well, actually, it's so they're very small rivers, very narrow, and for most of their way. I think the clarity. I think it's one of those things. I don't like to knock farmers. I know a lot of farmers. I think majority of farmers do a great job, but there are going to obviously be knock-on effects from what they do. And I think so sometimes the clarity of the water is not probably what it should be, due to runoff from various agricultural practices. But I think that's not new. That's always been the way to an extent since probably, again, let's say the 50s. But yeah, very, very small rivers. There will be deep holes, but for the most part, they're quite shallow. They are variable, but for the most part, they're fairly narrow rivers.
Wonderful. They do sound absolutely fantastic. And as thank you so much for that very kind offer of an invite. And that was one of the things I found, that is actually getting access to them is the hardest part, isn't it? That there's sort of, I've always seen them or thought about them as spoken in hushed tones, but it may just be that not so many people know about them. I honestly don't know. I remember years and years ago when I lived in Essex that I wanted to try, I had this idea that I would rent a farmer's lake or reservoir and stock it, and which I ended up doing. But I put an advert in the NFU journal and just said, mad keen fly fisherman, willing to rent a lake or do whatever it was, if that would happen. And I remember, and this shows how long ago it was, that I had a fax machine at home and a fax came through, and it was from somebody in Norfolk, said, well, it's not a lake, but we got some river if you want to fish it. And I didn't take it. And that has really niggled me. I know it's niggled me for years and years and years. So it almost, talking today is making me think about that message 25, 28 years ago, 29 years ago. I'm still thinking about that message that I received. And I remember the fact said, dear mad keen fly fisherman, we got some fishing here. Is it the case that it is not talked about in the same way, or is it that it's just difficult to access, or a combination of both?
I think it's probably a combination of both, actually. I think, I remember reading somewhere, someone had written a letter, maybe in Trout Salmon or something like that, and it said, I've just moved to Norfolk, and the sort of gist of the thing was, it seems a bit dead for fishing. There doesn't seem to be any fishing here whatsoever. And I sat there thinking, everyone will read that who sort of has been up there for a bit and maybe has fishing or access to fishing, chuckle a bit, but certainly not respond to it. And I think that, that was the mentality, is just like to sort of, first of all, my hackles went up to say, what are you talking about? North Norfolk's amazing. And then for fly fishing. And then I thought, oh, actually, no, that's it. That's, you don't respond to that sort of thing. So I think it's a little bit of both. I also think that the bits that can be fished tend to be syndicated or private water. There are, actually, funny enough, on the Glaven, there is a club. I'm not sure what the parameters are for membership. It may have quite a tight postcode or area membership, but I'm not sure. But no, they're great places and very pretty as well.
Yeah, I remember there was a fishery, I don't know if it was near where you were, I think it was called Narborough, and that had a section of river. Would it be the Nar?
The Nar, probably, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they had a section of that.
River, I don't know.
Yeah, it was. I was always tempted to go take a look at that, to at least experience, a chalk stream in a completely different environment, which sounds fascinating. But it sounds as though I'm sure your father just bought the house purely by luck, that it was there, and there was no planning in his life that it happened to be right on the river, was there?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, Mum's mad keen fisherwoman as well, so I think it was a fairly obvious move from their point of view. There was no hidden agenda.
Yeah, it was carefully planned by both parties. And your local tackle shop, I know you mentioned to me, that was owned by the magnificent John Wilson as well, and it sounds like your dad was a regular visitor in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Dad would go in there, and actually, do you know what? I can still remember. Funnily enough, I found it in a tube here, sorting out my kit. My first fishing rod that he bought me. I can remember him walking in a suit from Norwich, and him sort of giving me the rod. It was a sort of, I don't know, 5-foot orange spinning rod with a sort of reel. I can't remember what the reel was like, but I've still got the rod. And being so chuffed, that came from John Wilson. I think, Dad certainly used to spend quite a little bit of his lunch breaks in there getting advice and things. I mean, Dad has spends a lot of time up north in Scotland fishing. I'm not sure he thought that John's specific knowledge of salmon fishing in the north was quite up to scratch, but certainly the Norfolk knowledge was great. And funny enough, the best thing he ever advised to Dad was on the lakes where there are some carp in the lakes over near Edgefield. He suggested getting these plastic bands that you put on the hook, and you put a dog biscuit in, and you throw the dog biscuits in, they float, and the carp come up and suck the dog biscuits down. Well, with a fly rod, you sort of swing it out. When they take, it is unbelievable. So on a little trout rod, and these carp were getting up to sort of 9, 10 plus pounds, I think, in some cases, and they just take off across the pond. Was mega fun. So that was a John Wilson recommendation that went down had a lot of fun doing that.
I seem to remember him doing that on one of his TV programs, because he had his own lakes as well, didn't he? That he, I think, designed and had dug and everything else. And it's interesting what you say about the salmon, because I'm fast forwarding as many of the programs in my mind as I possibly can. I don't recall him salmon fishing, although I remember him catching a steelhead on the Copper River, and that certainly sparked many fires that he did spark within me. But I remember him catching a steelhead, but I don't remember him ever doing a salmon fishing program. I'm sure somebody can put me right on that. But
I think he did. I seem to slightly remember that he did, but it was sort of one-off episode. I think, Pete, we can't leave it there without you doing your impression of his laugh.
No, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But it's, come on, Wilson. And that's that one done. So, yeah, thank you for that hospital pass. I greatly appreciate that one. Whilst we're on salmon, you said, growing up that you were spending a lot of your time heading to the north and east of Scotland. And like you said, your first salmon was on a fly when you were 9 years old. Was that it, the moment that happened? And did that have something to do with where you live today now as well?
A little bit to do with where I live today. But I think my parents would say we used to go on holiday. We'd do sort of week here, week there. But when I was 9, we'd done, I think, a couple of years at Kinlochewe Lodge, which is just upriver of... So it's the river that runs into Loch Maree that comes out as the U and into the sea. And it was with the Hurst family, and it was, properly magical place to be. We had the river, obviously, to fish. And then we had the loch to go and dap on and fish for sea trout. And I think the 2 years, so when I was 7 and 8, the 2 years we'd done before that had really sort of flicked my switch. The gillies were amazing with us. We go on to the islands on Loch Maree, which are properly atmospheric. I mean, there's one with a sort of burial ground on it. The history there is absolutely extraordinary. It's beautiful. So I think they sort of slowly... And the other thing I might add is that there was the Hurst used to take up a team of young. So there was myself from Norfolk, and there was myself, and there'd be probably 5 other children there. So we had a team to go and do various bits and pieces. But certainly, I think the week I caught my salmon, I think we got 54, 50 in the 50s salmon, and it got to the last day. A few had been caught on spinner, a few had been caught on the spot on the fly. I, at this point, for some reason, I don't know why it had happened, I was determined that I was going to catch my first fish on the fly. And I could see the frustration from my father sort of saying, look, come on, Charlie, if you throw a spinner in, if you can cast with a spinner, we'll get down these pools, we will get you a fish. But for some reason, I didn't want to do that. And on the last day, everyone else left on the Saturday. It must have been the Saturday. Dad said, right, we'll go and do a morning of fishing and then we'll head south. And we were fishing down the wire pool, and I was going really slowly. I didn't want it to end. I was going so slowly that Dad overtook me. He was like, if you can't go fish this properly, I'm going to overtake you. So he overtook me, fished it down at sort of normal pace. And I was sort of wheedling this time out as much as possible, and boom, hooked into a fish. Dad's first reaction for a split second was like, he's wiped my eye. I cannot believe that's happened. Second reaction was, oh my God, no pressure to get this in the net. And he said it was the most sort of nerve-wracking 15 minutes of his life. And I know exactly how that feels, not with Alfie's, my youngest, but with Harry's salmon, because he tried so hard and had been so sort of, he, like me, was like, no, I'm going to catch this, my first one on the fly, because his brother had caught his on the spinner. I'm going to catch it on the fly. And I could feel the frustration that my dad felt by, come on, Harry, just use the spinner just for a little bit, But as soon as he hooked that fish, and he'd lost 2 or 3 already, my heart was just... so I feel for Dad on that. But that definitely, and I think there is my passion, I think, definitely was accelerated at that point. But I think, weirdly, I'd already had it because of the careful and the careful sort of nurturing by my parents, by their friends, by my godfather, by my godmother, by other friends who are doing it, that actually nowadays I'm afraid I'm not someone that catches a lot of fish. I spend an awful lot of time on the river fishing, but I don't actually. And I think that pre-bit to me catching the fish has enabled me to continue heading to the river in most conditions and not really worrying too much about whether I hook in or not. And I think that is quite important, because if, there is a sort of, in instructor terms and coaching terms, I think a lot of people feel that children need to get hooked into a fish as quickly as possible. And I think that fishing on a lake and getting that rod bent is important, but actually I think there also needs to be instilled the enjoyment and fun that can be got from just being on the river and fishing with your friends, or on your own, or however you want to do it.
Yeah, I like that. And you said how it was, you had that feeling before you landed that salmon. And to me, just listening to you tell that story, it became quite clear very quickly, because you said, I didn't want it to end. I was going down as slowly to eke out every minute. So it was clearly already there, wasn't it? And has stayed with you. And I think as you do get a little bit older, it is, more than just the fishing, isn't it? It's everything that goes with it, the surroundings, all the things you've talked about this morning, the kingfishers, the otters, everything is a part of what makes it so special for all of us, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing that, I've got, as you will have, loads of friends from every different type of background who fly fish, who fish, everybody's wallets are different to everyone else's, bank balances, etc. But I do feel that if you have a mindset of needing to catch fish every time, your wallet is going to get very light very quickly. If you are happy to be fishing with the off chance of a fish, if you're happy to be fishing in beautiful places and exploring places that aren't manicured, actually you can do it very inexpensively. And I think that's a key difference between fishing people in the UK at the moment. If you want to catch loads of fish, then you probably pay quite a lot of money. If you're happy fishing for the sake of fishing, it can be as cheap as you want. It's less than going to a rugby match or a football match. You can get your season ticket for less than one game of football or watching a game of rugby.
Yeah, no, they're very, very good points. It's funnily enough, you mentioned the U seems to enter into my life a number of times. And last year Emma and I had our first visit to the Spey with Danny, and fished with her, which was absolutely awesome. The fishing, sadly, it was September, there was no water, there was nothing going, it was bright sunshine, it was beautiful, we still loved it. But my friends Duncan and Keith they go every year to fish the U and below the lock. And we were flying out as they were coming in, and I was messaging them saying, I'm going to wave to you from the departure lounge at Inverness, and I saw them and they waved to us, and we were heading home and they were starting their fishing holiday, and they got some rain and absolutely had a fantastic trip. So that was really, really cool. But you've fished around a lot of areas. What are your favourites? Which rivers are the ones that mean a lot to you, and the ones that you've really enjoyed fishing?
I think, I cannot tell you how fortunate I've been with where I've been invited fishing by friends and family. But it's a funny one, because I think as fishing people, we do ask this question quite a lot of our friends. Where do you like best? And I have to say, I think for different reasons, Garranahein on the Isle of Lewis, the River Blackwater, that's where I properly learnt that, I was 14 to 20, 21, used to go up there. And that's where I learnt that you can experiment with salmon and sea trout. It's not written rules. You can change the way you're fishing for them. I think on Garranahein, Christoph Buxton, who was the owner, he learned that you fish into the wind. So you cast so that the fly came back across the waves, sort of into the waves. So you might have been fishing upriver, with a muddler and a dropper and a tail fly that sank. And it's, that for me really gave me a feeling of this is not what you read in a book is useful, but don't take it as gospel. So I think, Garanohain on the Isle of Lewis, definitely one of my favourite places. Again, Loch Hope is the Hope River is just a magical river to fish, and that's on the north coast. Comes out of Loch Hope. Again, my sister caught her first salmon there. I never actually caught a salmon on the Hope, interestingly. I caught quite a lot of sea trout. But no, my sister caught her first there. Loch Marie, I think, is just a magical, extraordinary place to be. And then all those northern spate rivers, the Neva, the Helmsdale, the Hallidale. I've had quite an amazing amount of fun on the Hallidale. But no, the Neva, as a sort of in early 20s, we used to go up there in May with a friend, and it was spoiling and just an unbelievable place to fish. It's the only place I've had, except for nearly you, of course, it's the only place where I had the gilly turn round to a friend of mine, and he said, the next cast, you will hook a fish. Boom, in. I then fished the next pool down, and we were fishing it down. He goes, yeah, Charlie, I'm going to say the same again. Next cast, you're going to hook a fish. And I didn't. He looked at me and he goes, pull your line in. So I pulled the line in. Sure enough, my fly had looped back on itself. It was sort of caught on the line. He goes, right, do it again. You'll hook one. Cast it out. Boom! Straight into a fish. It was to call two fish for two people in two different pools, I think is quite impressive. But that I think if you're going to drill down into one of my favourite places, the Dalmallet beat of the Neva, it's a rotation, so it's like the Helmsdale. You stay in the lodge, but you rotate down the river and up the river. The Dalmallet beat is a very magical place to fish. But yeah, I mean, they all of them have their own little quirks, and again, a lot of it comes down to the character of the people who work on the river and the amount of fun and who you're with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've said so many times on this podcast, the friends that you fish with make a trip. And when you have them, a special fishing friend, you have many great adventures together with them as well. Interestingly, you mentioned the Hallidale as well. And I was just watching the Gaelic salmon fishing program at the weekend. I've seen it about 100,000 times, but I still enjoy it. And they had the Hallidale there, and where they'd had a lift of water, and the head gilly was out fishing, and I think he had 4 or 5 fish within a very short period of time. And what a wonderful river it seemed. And then they walked up the river, and someone else, I've met him actually once somewhere in the distant past, was playing a fish and had a fish, and that was wonderful. And I wanted to move on as well, that you've written for Eat Sleep Fish a number of years ago about your travels and where you fished in British Columbia for Pacific salmon, and wondered if you could not do a comparison, but tell us a little bit about how you found that. I guess I'm saying I don't want a comparison, but I guess you got to, in some regards, to the fishing that you might do for Atlantic salmon. Was it different? Was it better? Was it worse? Was it just a great experience for being there and everything else? And I know in the piece that you wrote, I seem to remember that bears came pretty close, and you had some close encounters with those as well, which, we talked about all the lovely stuff on the rivers here, but bears are a slightly different proposition, aren't they?
Yeah, that was quite entertaining. I was fishing by myself, and the person who I was out there with, my friend, he was further down the river, and I walked up and I bumped into 2 German guys and this black bear. And they're normally pretty good, the black bears, to be honest with you. Just showed a little bit too much interest in us, and it crossed over. I'd fallen in, so my waders were drying inside out. I have never put my waders on so quickly in all my life. And I have to say that they say don't run away, because if you run away, that's it. That black bear thinks you're food. I must be a bit of a struggle. If that had come towards us, I'd have been, either jumping on one of the Germans' backs and saying, "Take me away," or hiding behind them at the very least. But it was very funny. No, I think the key with going somewhere like Vancouver to fish is you've got to disassociate it with UK fishing. Actually, weirdly, the method that we were fishing was slightly different. We were nymphing for the salmon, which is done because if you swing a fly, you just clothesline fish left, right, and centre, and you'd be foul hooking them. So from that point of view, it was great. It was great fun. But no, I went out there very much with the attitude that this is a different type of fishing entirely, because otherwise, I could have gone out there and caught 100 plus fish in a week easily. And obviously you can't do that in UK rivers. So there was a slight, the mindset I'd already set, so that when I came back, I wouldn't not enjoy my fishing here, because I was a little bit concerned about it. I have to say, you go out there, you're hooking into fish. It's not as easy as all that, but, if you have a blank day, you're doing something very wrong. So, yeah, I had to be slightly careful of it. It was an amazing experience. I mean, Canada is absolutely stunning. And again, I think slightly helps in the fact that it did feel different to Scotland. It never felt like there was a comparison to be made, I guess. Great fun nonetheless. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, cool. I suppose the nearest really comparable may well be Steelhead in that sense. So, yeah, that may be a closer one, perhaps. Black bears, yeah, I've had close encounters with them. They make wading look really easy when they come across the river towards you, don't they?
They do, and they're pretty quick as well. Actually, this one, funnily enough, came across a tree across the river. It sort of ambled across, keeping its beady eyes on us, and then sauntered off down the river. And I have to say, it sauntered off in the direction of my friend. And so it's the way I had to walk. So I have to say, I was sort of planning on heading back to him. I did arrive back to him with the Germans, the German fisherman. He goes, "Where have you been?" I was like, "Well, I didn't want to walk back by myself."
It is funny, isn't it? You get the sense that you're being watched sometimes. And I know I've done it. I was fishing the North Umpqua and with my friend, and I got a sense, and I got the glimpse of the bear which was ambling away in the other direction, I'm pleased to say. But you sometimes get that. And I know with grizzlies as well, there's a smell. And I've experienced that before as well, that they're sort of about somewhere or other as well. So, but being aware of it, I think helps. And like you say, making plenty of noise and let them know, that you're about, I think gets them out of the way.
Actually, funny enough, it was it's the cougars that you want to worry about, because they hang out up in trees and things like that. And actually, one of the bits of advice I was given was, if you're walking, put your sunglasses on the back of your head, because they think those are eyes as well. I don't know if that's a tried and tested thing, but I did that when I was walking down the tracks, sunglasses on the back.
That one, yeah, my friend told me, only told me towards the end of Jimmy told me at the end of the trip that we were fishing there. We were on the Deschutes, I think we were. And he said about how the cougars attack, and they put their paws on your shoulders and bite the neck, don't they? That's apparently might be why they said to put the sunglasses on. So yeah, that one I just kept looking behind me the whole time, and yeah, again you get that sense, but that keeps you on your toes. But we didn't see them, and that was fine. But I wanted to move on a little bit to I'd love listeners to know about Fin Hunter and what you're doing, because it's that time of year, I guess, where people may be considering getting some new waders. And, I know I've had some that it's only really the Aquashore that's holding them together towards the end. And when a new pair of waders comes along, and This has been something I know you've been doing for a little while, but I wondered if you could tell listeners the thought process behind it and how it's come about and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I would like to say, I mean, I started it probably 9-10 years ago, and I'd like to say that it came about as some sort of environmental crusade. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It was slightly more selfish reasons than that. Claire, my wife, who's an artist, has a very successful artist. She creates things that she sells, and at that time, I am a sporting agent, so I let sort of shooting, fishing, and stalking throughout Scotland. So I was essentially selling other people's products, other people's dreams, other people's creations. When it comes to, you go down and there's a particular beat has a particular, great food or whatever. And I was quite jealous of Claire that she could create something and sell it. So I put my thinking cap on and was sort of looking at various bits and pieces. I tried to draw a few pictures. That didn't work. So pretty quickly gave up being an artist as an option. And my father-in-law actually has got a pair of waders that I think might be about 28 years old now. They're more bicycle puncture repair kit than wader. They're the old ocean ones. And he was talking about them. And in fact, they were older than the people I was with. I had a mate with me fishing, and Tim was fishing, he was younger than Tim's waders. And from that point, and I don't know what made me think of it. I thought, well, hang on a minute. There's so much, these new breathable waders. We might do a season in them. We might eat 2 seasons out of them. What's actually happening to these products? A lot get returned to the companies. Looked into it. Not a lot, they're either being shredded, burnt, or put on landfill. So it's like, God, these waders actually have quite a lot of usable material on them. So I researched upcycling, recycling waders, and actually, weirdly, there was a company in the States already doing it. So I was a bit like, oh, well, okay, then that's been done. I won't take it any further. And then I thought, well, hang on, this has got an environmental sort of reasoning behind it. There is an environmental benefit to taking this old material and turning it into something new and not sending it. We cut up a pair of waders. What's that? A meter squared, perhaps even more of fabric, 2 meters squared of fabric that's going into the ground somewhere potentially. If we buy anything from the company that are doing it in the States, it's got to be flown over here. And also they're not using our old waders. So I went ahead with it. Luckily found Sarah Plummer, who lives in Kelso, who is amazing at creating the products. I mean, I give her, I'll say to her, oh, could you, the recent one is some some binders to keep skis together. So when you're carrying them, they don't slip apart. So, I sent her through a really crap sort of description of what I wanted. And she knew exactly what I wanted. She made them. They were brilliant. They were absolutely perfect. And same goes with rod bags or reel cases. She just knows. And she's very quick at making the stuff. And the quality is perfect. So it all came together quite quickly once I decided to go ahead. And we started by making fly wallets and reel cases. So fly wallets out of the breathable wader fabric, and reel cases out of the neoprene. And we've sort of slowly but surely developed our product line. We've got the bags are very popular, the kit bags, the duffel bags are very popular, and the sort of tote bags have also been very popular. And that is literally, and I don't mind people, when I went to do you remember the fly fishing fair in London? I took all the products down there, and one of the products is literally just the top half of parawader. So you cut the legs off, and then you stitch the bottom, so it creates a bag, and then you put 2 straps on it. Now, I think a lot of people saw that and thought, yeah, I can do that at home. So I think a lot of people have, which is great. And I really don't mind people copying that idea because, again, the environmental benefits of them not throwing their waders in. I would ask if they could pop the legs into an envelope and send them through. That'd be mega, because then we can make some other stuff out of the legs. But yeah, I mean, that's a prime example of a bag that has been really popular. And fun enough, Mum, I gave Mum one of those bags, and she sent it back to me saying, "Can you put a zip across the top?" And she keeps her waders in it, so they've become her wader bag, which is brilliant. So yeah, no, it's been a gradual progression. It's on the side of my other business doing sporting lets. So it just sort of ticks along nicely. My son Harry, my eldest son Harry, is really keen. He's doing a bit of the photography at the moment of the products and doing various other bits and pieces. So I think he's quite keen to come in and earn a bit of pocket money doing bits and pieces for the company. But no, otherwise it's just sort of been a slow, natural evolution as to the products we've got.
Yeah, they're really, like you say, the bag. I have one of the tote bags which I use and like very, very much. And I was looking on the website this morning, the kit bags, I think some of them are sold out. The lined ones look really, really cool. Even if you're going on a fishing trip or to keep your kit in, your fishing kit, whatever that may be. And it is wonderful that you've come up with this idea to make these products out of, like you say, something that's probably going to end up in landfill. So does that mean that you're always on the hunt for old knackered waders?
It does, absolutely. In fact, I've got in the diary to go up and see Diver Dave. He's got a lot of the wader fabric that couldn't be saved, so I'm going to go up to see him in the next couple of weeks to pick up some more fabric. A few people donate, so a lot of friends, when their waders are done and dusted, they drop them in at some point when they're passing. And again, I get Sarah, who does the manufacturing side. She picks up a lot as well, which is fantastic. So yeah, there's obviously we do have moments where we've run out, and I've got to sort of say to everyone, right, there's going to be a small delay on getting your product made, but that rarely happens.
Yeah, great. And I'd recommend that people do look at the website because it's really interesting. The design and how the items are put together look familiar and are used and repurposed in an unfamiliar way, which I kind of like as well, that they look fantastic. A shout out to your wife, Claire, as well, because obviously we featured her artwork in the second edition of Fly Culture, and the work that she does by painting using pheasant tails is really, really cool. So I thought I should mention that. But Charlie, if people want to find you, let's talk about your letting business as well, sporting stuff. What do you do there?
Yeah, so that, started off 14, 15 years ago doing normal Scottish lets. So take a lodge for a week's fishing as the core, and then maybe shooting and stalking on top. Actually, weirdly, I think the industry that I'm in is fascinating in the fact that, you go back 60, 70 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that now, and lets in Scotland were done by the year. You took a place for 12 months, or you took it for 2 years or 5 years. And, you'd come up from Yorkshire, London, wherever, in August, and then you'd spend a good amount of time in Scotland shooting, fishing, stalking. That then very quickly, I sort of imagine in the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, compressed, and that went to sort of maybe month-long lets or 2 week, 1 week lets, which we then had for, the week-long let was the standard when I became a sporting agent. And it has really interestingly, in the last 8 years, it's gone from a week let down to 1, 2, 3 day lets. And people love a 3 day, taking 3 days fishing in a lodge or a hotel, and coming up and then heading back down south again, or wherever they come from. And I think it's a really interesting change in how we take our fishing and how we go about our fishing. I mean, I guess the rise of FishPal massively encouraged the daily let rods, which is fantastic. And also, obviously, transport had a massive effect on that as well. You know, we can get places now that we couldn't maybe even 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago. You know, it's a natural progression. But no, so I started off in the industry doing that, letting by the week. That has now slightly changed, as I said, and now I specialise in running trips off the Royal Scotsman, which is a Belmond-operated train based in Edinburgh. It runs up through Scotland. We can go to the west coast, we can go up through the middle, and then we can go round to the east. I can put people on that train throughout the summer. They have amazing itineraries anyway, but then we can slot into that itinerary days fishing on wherever we happen to be, the nearest river. I don't like traveling more than an hour, really. And yeah, it works really nicely. And I also do shooting and stalking trips later in the year as well. So that's what I've sort of specialised in. And it also means, going back to what I said about the Fin Hunter UK stuff, it means that I'm creating a product. Although I might be using other people's services, it is essentially my product that I'm selling, not selling something for someone, which again, I think just ignites a bit of excitement. It invites the passion for what I'm doing.
Nice. That's fantastic. Well, that's great to hear about all of those things. And I wondered, can you give us your contact details for Fin Hunter and your other trips as well then, and where people can find you on social media as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Fin Hunter stuff is all under the Fin Hunter UK name. So it's .com for the website. And on Instagram, Twitter, well, those are the two I mainly use, actually, Instagram and Twitter, and a little bit of Facebook. Again, Fin Hunter UK is the name I go under for them. Mainly, funny enough, because I know social media has popped up in your conversations with other people quite a lot in the past. It sort of seems to be a slightly double-edged sword, where I've just sort of got into Twitter, I guess. Having had an account for ages, I haven't really used it. Got into it, and I'm quite enjoying Twitter. I don't know why. Instagram, I think, is a fairly standard. It's fairly low impact. You don't get people putting their opinions about. Facebook, I can't help but feel has become almost toxic within the fishing world. Member of a lot of fishing groups, and there's always snarky comments about something from some people, and they're probably everyone's really nice. We all know fishermen tend to be and women tend to be really nice. I don't know what makes us, particularly I think when it comes to, I would prefer to see on social media, of course, all fish being handled in a responsible way, but there are going to be situations where it's a first fish and they can't stand in the water with it in the water because it's too deep or whatever. And I think we just need to sort of slightly bear that in mind. So Facebook, weirdly, I've stepped back from a bit. Cool.
Well, that's given people an idea how to get hold of you, and that's Fin Hunter.
Sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No, that's all right. No, because if you get me going on that'll be it. So it's nice to veer back. I've segued away from that basically nicely. But I would encourage people to have a look. As I said, I've no vested interest whatsoever. I just really like what Charlie's doing, and it's really interesting, and it's different, and it's it's artisan work, I guess, as well. And I'm always a big fan of that as well. So I hope people take a look at that. Charlie, it's been great to catch up. We've talked well over an hour now, and it's been lovely to catch up and talk with you. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you for coming along to talk with me today. And we've covered some ground today as well. And I've really enjoyed listening to your passion for many aspects of fishing. And it's it's lovely, the theme that seems to come through from an early age. People encouraged youngsters when you were young to fish together. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And it's clearly rubbed off on you, and you're doing the same sort of thing. And you're encouraging youngsters into fishing in such a positive way. So many thanks for that. And like I say, the River Rats thing as well, I think was a wonderful initiative. And I hope it sounds as though you're incredibly busy, but if you get the chance to pick that up again as well, I think it's a wonderful initiative. But thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. It's been great, mate.
Well, thank you very much. And let's hopefully, why don't we meet in the middle, Norfolk? We'll call Norfolk the middle, and do some fishing at some point.
That would be wonderful. Charlie Brownlow, thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast today.
Brilliant, Pete. Thank you.
Everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. As ever, there will be one each week. And if you are enjoying them, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for listening.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.